One of these done during the birth of Jesus. Now, after that, there were medieval censuses, because what king would want to be a king if he didn't know how many subjects he had? So many medieval censuses was taken also. One of the only ones that last down to this time was something called the Domesday Book, which was taken in England, and it was done by William the Conqueror. It was completed in 1086, but it really wasn't a census. After William the Conqueror crossed the English Channel, defeated England at the Battle of Hastings, he decided he wanted to find out what he had just won. So he actually had an enumeration done of all landholders in England. So they would go around, register, write down the names of all the landholders and what they owned. So it was really more for taxation purposes rather than an actual census. It didn't list everybody's name, it only listed landowners. But it is one of the few medieval censuses that last down to this day. In 1790, a new form of government appeared on the earth. The United States was the world's first democratically, is this on? Yes? Yeah. Elected representative government, which meant that the House of Representatives were going to have, each congressman in the House of Representatives was going to represent a certain portion of people in his home state. Right now, for an example, each congressman represents, is this going in and out?
You got to keep it close to your mouth.
Hello?
Yeah.
Represents 720,000, it's the same microphone. Yeah. Represents 720,000 people. So there had to be a way to determine how to decide on how many representatives there would be. So the United States Constitution in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1, saying that in order for us to equally apportion the House of Representatives, required that an actual enumeration would be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term, I'm not going to use this is driving me crazy, right? Every 10 years since then. So there's been a United States Census taken every 10 years since 1790 up to our most recent one in 2010.
So you could actually go back and find all those old censuses?
Well, why do genealogists love the census? There's 3 reasons. One is that you can actually trace an American person or family back in an almost unbroken line to 1790. The census record is one of the few records you'll find that lists a whole family group together. Most other times you're going to be looking at things with a birth record, where it's going to only list an individual or an individual and their parents. It's rare to be able to find something that lists the whole family. About the only other thing that you maybe will find that happen is in estate papers and wills, where you'll see somebody dies and leaves all his property and there'll be a list of all his family members. And then the third thing, which may be the most important, is that each census record is really a roadmap to other records. When I first started doing genealogy about 30 years ago, I hadn't any idea about my family history. Both my parents had passed at that time, and actually most of their generation had also passed. I never knew any of my grandparents. I knew nothing about my family at all. But since then, I've been able to develop my whole family history back, and I would say that at least 70% of what I've uncovered about the family has been from census records. And the rest of it was from things that the census records told me to go and look for, and that's how I was able to find all those things. Now we're talking about how you can trace the family back, and let's take an extreme example. Alvin Woodson was the oldest undisputed veteran of the Civil War. He lived from 1847 to 1956. So that means if you were going to trace Albert's history back now, his census record back now, you could find a snapshot of his life and his family in 1940. in 1930, in 1920, in 1910, in 1900. Now remember I said an almost unbroken line? Unfortunately, 1890 is the black hole of census records. The entire, almost the entire 1890 census was destroyed in a fire in the Commerce Building in Washington in 1921. It really wasn't the fire that did it. The fire broke out in the building, and it was the water damage that that destroyed the records. You can see this is a photograph of what it looked like afterwards. It was in such bad condition that the Congress in 1933 actually authorized the destruction of everything that was left. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure why they did that. I think today that wouldn't have been done. They would have preserved everything they did. And I've never been able to honestly find out why they voted to destroy it, but they did. However, in 1942 and 1953, small fabrics of the records were found in other places. Today, about 3,500 names exist from that census, and a couple of them happen to be in Jersey City. I think there's about 9 names from Jersey City. So unfortunately, as you're tracing your family back, you're going to hit a blank spot on that 1890 census. But then you can go back and pick up right where you left off. The 1880 census, the 1870, the 1860, and so far all the way back. The fact that they did find two, now by the way, this breaks our hearts, our genealogists, that 1890 is missing. I would love to see that census. It would answer a lot of questions for me, for my family. But the fact, the way I always look at it, I'm always an optimist. The fact that they actually found some fragments of those two sentences, I always think that if Steven Spielberg ever makes another Indiana Jones picture, it's going to feature an octogenarian Harrison Ford finding a copy of the 1890 census. It's not, unfortunately, 1890 census isn't the only census that's missing. Here in New Jersey, unfortunately, the 1790 census for New Jersey, the 1810 and the 1820 census is missing. The 1800 census exists, but it only includes Cumberland County. Who the heck lived in Cumberland County? 4 farmers? Now, also in the 1860, in Newark, the wards 6 to 8, 10 to 12, and part of the rest of Essex County was so severely damaged it's very difficult to use. All right, now, if you remember, I went back and I said the other reason we like the census is because it lists the whole family in one record. I looked around for someone in my family who had a big family. My Uncle Frank lived in Hoboken, and he raised 12 children in Hoboken. Here is the, I think this is the 1910 census. I'm not sure myself if I did, but here he is, Frank Murgittroyd, with his wife Clara. His daughter Daisy Bell. You know, he had so many kids, he kind of ran out of good names. He had a daughter named Drusilla. And he wasn't even done here. He had 4 more kids after this. But again, here is a place where you can see the whole family together and have information about everybody in your family. Because all of you are probably only descended from one of these people. But as time goes by, you may decide you want to find out who these other people are. And that's where the census can help you do it. And finally, I'm going to just go over this quickly, because I'm not going to talk about it now, but I'm going to talk about it later when we look at other censuses. Each thing in the census is a roadmap to send you to another census. So the first census was done in 1790. It was directed by the then Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson may have been the founder of the Democratic Party, but he was a firm believer in small government. That's how things change. So when he took the census, he felt no need to hire anybody special to do the census. Instead, he used about 1,300 federal marshals who had recently been appointed and told them, hey, you guys go out and while you're doing your work, write down the names of the people you live there. The census only listed the name of the head of the household. It didn't list the names of everybody living in the household. Matter of fact, Thomas was so frugal, he didn't even give the marshals a form to write the names down on. So this is an example of the 1790 census from Claverack, New York. And you can see the guy pretty much just made lines, pencil lines.